Becky, thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you for all the work you do as Shadow Business Secretary in developing our industrial strategy, which I'll be talking about a bit later. You're also a brilliant MP for Salford, where today the Shadow Cabinet meets, and I've already had a message from Andrew Gwynn saying he likes the idea of coming to Shadow Cabinet meetings by tram from his home, and so I think it's a bid to meet here every week. Is that correct? And at the Shadow Cabinet meeting, which we'll be holding later on today, we'll be finalising our plans to stop the disaster of No Deal ahead of the return to Parliament tomorrow. That's why I was keen that we have the meeting here today to go through all of that, but also to go through our strategy and our offer for the country as a whole. We are just a couple of miles from the site where 200 years ago last month the Peterloo massacre took place. Working class people demanding democratic representation in Parliament. They were met with brutal force and carnage from the authorities as they were cut down by cavalrymen. As Shelley pointed out in his wonderful poem, The Mask of Anarchy. That was part of the price paid to win the democratic rights that we all have in this country. We should never forget those that suffered so much that we might live in freedom in the future. Like all progressive change, democracy was won from below. It wasn't handed down from above. So when a Prime Minister who hasn't won an election and who doesn't have a majority decrees that Parliament will be shut down because he knows his plan for a disastrous no deal doesn't have the votes, we say this is an attack on democracy which will be resisted. That was the message given loud and clear at protests all around the country at the weekend. I joined a large demonstration in Glasgow's George Square, and Labour MPs were on protests in many, many other cities all across the country. The people will not allow a phony populist cabal in Downing Street, in hock to the vested interest of the richest, to deny them their democratic voice. And now the government is threatening to just ignore legislation it doesn't like. That is how the elite operates. The rules they set for everyone else only apply to them when it suits them. Labour will never try to silence Parliament, but we don't believe democracy stops there. We want to expand democracy, not restrict it. Democracy is how people won the right to education, the right to healthcare, decent housing, and in the post-war Labour government, the welfare state. Labour will push democracy further into the workplace, into the economy, to give people more control over their lives. Today, I want to talk about how Labour will bring about a democratic transformation of our economy that will breathe new life into every nation and region of our country. But first, we face the threat of no deal, which would decimate industry and destroy people's jobs in those very same regions. Johnson and his right-wing cabinet don't care about the economic cost. They and their wealthy donors, they won't be the ones paying it. The price will be paid by working people in places like Salford and all around the country. The battle to stop no deal isn't a struggle between those who want to leave the EU and those who want continued membership, as Becky just said. It's a battle of the many against the few, who are hijacking the referendum result to shift even more power and wealth towards those at the top. As has become ever clearer, a no-deal Brexit is really a Trump deal Brexit, leading to a one-sided United States trade deal that will put us at the mercy of Donald Trump and the biggest American corporations. The pally enthusiasm of the US president for Britain's new prime minister only serves to underline that. In Boris Johnson, Trump has found a compliant British leader who will dance to his tune. Unless we stop Johnson's Tory government now, it's a headlong rush into the arms of Donald Trump. I am not prepared to stand by and allow our public services and protections to be handed over to US big business. There can be no doubt about the damage no deal will do to our economy. You don't have to take my word for it. For example, the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders says it will lead to death by 1,000 cuts in the car industry as new work seeps overseas. So who do you trust on the impact of no deal? The car manufacturers themselves or Boris Johnson and the Tories? The Food and Drink Federation says shoppers will notice shortages of some foods within weeks of no deal. Again, who do you trust? Those who know the food industry inside out or Boris Johnson and the Tories? And last time I looked, Boris Johnson had never worked in a supermarket. The TUC says no deal will threaten people's hard-won rights at work. So who do you trust? The TUC, an organisation founded in Manchester that exists to look out for workers, or Boris Johnson and the Tories? The impact will be especially hard on areas like the West Midlands, where so much of our car production is based. It's an industry that depends on no tariffs or friction at the border. Jaguar Land Rover, for example, can only prepare for days of disruption because the company uses 25 million separate parts every day. 10,000 people are employed in car production in Solihull, 9,000 in Coventry, 8,000 in Birmingham. Think of those workers and the stress and worry they're going through as they watch the Tory government charge towards an outcome that risks destroying their jobs. Imagine the damage to their communities, to that region, if that happens. It would tear the heart out of the West Midlands. The government can't claim to be building a Midlands engine and then follow a policy that trashes the car industry. Or think of Yorkshire and the Humber, where 10,000 people are employed in the steel industry. No deal would be a hammer blow to them, placing trade restrictions on virtually all steel companies' export markets and opening us up to cheap, protected US steel imports that would be the death knell for the UK steel industry. No deal equals no steel. Or look to the east of England, the region where the largest agricultural sector, employing more than 30,000 people. That sector is in serious difficulty if no deal goes through. The National Farmers Union says it would be catastrophic for British agriculture. Of course, the threat of no deal comes on top of the damage already done to industry by 9 years of Conservative government. Remember George Osborne's March of the Makers? It's easily forgotten, so don't worry if you haven't committed it to your memory. Or recall the time Conservative ministers suddenly started talking about an industrial strategy. They were hollow words. There are now 15,000 fewer people working in manufacturing industry than there were when the government set up the Department for Industrial Strategy 3 years ago. That is some achievement. And over the last decade, almost 500,000 manufacturing jobs have been lost, hitting regions like the North West and the Midlands very hard. The Tories always put first those who lend and speculate over those who actually make things. That's why it's the billionaire hedge funders who bankroll Boris Johnson and his party who are calling the shots. While their wealth balloons, manufacturing workers are losing out on £55 per week under the Tories. Those workers are now £3,000 a year worse off than it would otherwise have been due to falling wages growth over the past 9 years. That's the Conservative record on manufacturing. Fewer people employed and stagnating pay. And with the lenders and the speculators in charge, wealth, power and opportunity aren't shared evenly across the country. They're concentrated around our capital. We have the worst regional inequality in Europe. Take spending on transport. It's currently £1,023 per head in London, compared to just £422 in the north. If it was allocated evenly across the country, the East Midlands would be getting double the amount per person it is now. None of this will be fixed by Sajid Javid when he delivers his con job pre-election spending review this week. Every recycled, hopelessly inadequate spending pledge put out by Javid, or rather by his political boss in number 10, only proves Labour's point that austerity is a political choice that has caused huge suffering and damaged our economy in the process. And if Javid's own staff can't trust him to protect them, what faith can workers across the UK have in the Chancellor of the Exchequer? Labour, in contrast, does have a serious and practical plan to get our economy working in every town, city, region and nation of our country with a record investment blitz. Our £250 billion National Transformation Fund, which John McDonnell, sitting here today, who is leading the way on, has said will be based outside of London in the north, will power a massive upgrade to our infrastructure from transport to energy to broadband. Let me just illustrate the scale of what we're proposing. Johnson, in his first days as Prime Minister, announced with great fanfare and a lot of hype a Towns Fund of £3.6 billion for capital spending on infrastructure. Our National Transformation Fund is 70 times bigger. That's the scale of investment our country needs after so many years of neglect. That's the scale of Labour's ambition. No more tinkering around the edges, and Labour will also set up a national investment bank, backed up by a network of regional development banks to provide a further £250 billion of capital for emerging businesses and for cooperatives. The regional banks will have elected representatives, local stakeholders on their boards, allowing each region to rebuild its economy in its own terms, devolving economic power and getting the money where it's needed, what Andy Burnham often talked about when he was in the shadow cabinet. Take the southwest of England, which has some of the lowest paid areas in the whole country. That's why they need real economic power to take decisions locally, to deliver good jobs to their region, and why a Labour government would underpin that with a real living wage of £10 per hour by 2020. And we'll establish a new post bank operating out of post offices, stemming the tide of post office closures and helping to revive our high streets. As a national network with hundreds of branches in every region, the post bank will play a role in rebalancing our economy, with deposits in prosperous parts used to back loans to businesses in more deprived areas. For decades, politicians have told us the economy is beyond democratic control, like a force of nature that can lay waste to entire communities, and we just have to grin and bear it. It's an idea that suits the super rich, hoarding the wealth that we all create, because it makes change seem impossible. It demotivates people, it disempowers them. But it's not true. Through voting, through democracy, you can change in whose interests the economy works. Labour will extend democracy to the workplace through collective bargaining, workers on boards and our inclusive ownership funds, which will transfer billions of pounds into the hands of workers who are the real wealth creators. And when I say Labour will invest $500 billion, that's not just an abstract number on a financial spreadsheet. It stands for an economic transformation that will change your daily life. Investment on that scale, directed through a real industrial strategy, means good new jobs where you live. With a serious strategy and a radical Labour government, the economy can be a tool in our hands rather than the master of our fate. And that means we can restore prosperity to regions of our country that have been held back for too long. Let me give you a concrete example of what it will mean. Labour will invest in Crossrail for the North to link our great northern cities, from Liverpool in the northwest across to Hull in Yorkshire and up to the northeast. Last year, Steve Rotherham waved me off from Liverpool to catch a train to Hull on the Trans-Pennine Express, an odd name for a train that goes at that speed. The 126-mile journey takes about 3 hours. But if I went from London to Paris on the Eurostar, the 286-mile trip would take 40 minutes less. As our Shadow Transport Secretary Andy MacDonald has made clear, the government's current focus on the Leeds to Manchester route, which is actually no longer than the Central Line on London Underground, is totally inadequate. To carry on boasting about a northern powerhouse while refusing to fund proper railway infrastructure for the north is an insult. We need the full Crossrail for the north. Just as local government leaders and mayors, including Andy Burnham, who's here, Joe Anderson, who's here, and Steve Rotherham, who's here, have called for, to ensure the north is no longer held back. Where this government fails, Labour will succeed and power up the north. A real industrial strategy and a serious economic plan will allow the government to prioritise what matters most. And nothing is more important than the climate emergency. This, as Becky pointed out, is the biggest crisis facing humanity, globally, nationally and locally. Rising sea levels and toxic air are as much of a threat here in Britain as anywhere. And just down the road, here in Salford, the university is at the leading edge of energy research and energy conservation, and I compliment them on the great work they've done, and I thank them for the visit I took to see their work. By directing investment to green technologies and retrofitting houses to increase energy efficiency, we will create jobs and reduce our harmful emissions at the same time. It will be a green industrial revolution. Many of those jobs will be in places that have never recovered from the destruction of industry at the hands of Thatcher's Conservatives in the 1980s. Labour's plan for a 7-fold increase in offshore wind energy will bring 12,000 good new jobs to Norfolk, 11,000 to the Humber, 10,000 to the northeast. And the retrofitting of homes will create more than 8,000 jobs in the West Midlands, 4,000 in South Yorkshire and 1,700 in Derbyshire, whilst at the same time saving people money on their energy bills. There's a creative good all round through our green industrial strategy. Good quality jobs and strong local industries contribute so much to the identity of a place. But local identity is also bound up with the services people rely on and the community facilities that bring people together. When you lose your library, lose your swimming pool, or your public spaces, your Shore Start Centre has closed, it saps the spirit from the area. You feel a sense of decline. A sense of place is important, but it's being lost because of the gutting of local government by the Tories. And there are many councillors here who go through horrors every week of trying to work out how they're going to maintain services without sufficient funding from central government. It will come as no surprise to council leaders and councillors in the audience to learn that the cuts have not been spread evenly. They've hit the poorest areas the hardest, as our Shadow Community Secretary Andrew Gwynn has exposed. 9 out of the 10 most deprived councils in the country have seen cuts of almost 3 times the national average. Just think of that figure. 9 out of 10 seen 3 times the national average of cuts. Conservative-run Northamptonshire has already collapsed, and with more cuts on the way, more councils could follow. Only Labour will end austerity, fund local government, and invest in all of the regions of our country, revive industry and manufacturing, and restore hope and pride in our communities. So first, we must come together to stop No Deal. This week could be our last chance. We are working with other parties to do everything necessary to pull our country back from the brink. Then we need a general election. When a government finds itself without a majority, the solution is not to undermine democracy. The solution is to let the people decide and call a general election. It is the people, not an unelected Prime Minister, who should determine our country's future. An election is the democratic way forward. To give the people the choice between the 2 very different directions of our country. One that will see our industries run down while the super rich get even richer from a Trump deal Brexit. Or a different path that will bring good, secure, well-paid jobs to every region through a proper industrial strategy. That will end the inequality that blights our country. And that will usher in the democratic transformation of our economy so it works for the real wealth creators, the people. And in that election, Labour will give people the chance to take back control and have the final say in a public vote with credible options on both sides, including the option to remain. It's Labour that offers hope and a plan that will bring our communities together. We won't shut down democracy and hoard power in Westminster. We'll spread wealth and power to every region and nation of our country. Thank you.
So we've got time for some press questions, and in the first round, I think I'll start with Patrick Hurst, just sitting at the back there. Have we got a roving mic?
Hello. If there was to be a second referendum, can you tell me whether Labour would vote, would back a Labour leave option at all?
I'll just take one more. Kate McCann from Sky.
Hi, Kate McCann from Sky News. Mr Corbyn, Tony Blair has asked you to block a future general election, but from what you've just said there, it sounds like it's something you would support. So if Boris Johnson seeks an election in the coming weeks, would you support that under any circumstance at any time? And if I may, is a vote of no confidence still on the table, and if so, when? Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for those 2 questions. On your questions, first of all, we will do everything we can to stop a no-deal exit from the European Union. That is our priority. The vote of no confidence is very much there on the table. It's not an either-or. Both options are absolutely there. And we will do everything we can in the coming weeks to prevent a no-deal. We want a general election so the people of this country can decide their future. And we're very clear that we would, in the Labour manifesto, include a public vote under a Labour government with the option of remain or whatever alternative Parliament has come to. If it's no deal, then we would vote to remain. If it's any other deal, then our party's democratic processes will decide what position we take. But It's very, very clear there will be that choice that is put there. And we'll do everything we can this week to prevent the government actually usurping the power of Parliament and taking this country out on the 31st of October.
Okay, we've got Kevin Fitzpatrick from the BBC.
Would you back a general election even if it means that we could leave the EU without a deal on October the 31st? And here in the Northwest, in the 10 constituencies with the highest Leave vote, 7 of those currently have Labour MPs. So how would you convince at a general election Leave voting Labour supporters not to abandon the party if you're seen to block Brexit?
And Kate Proctor from The Guardian.
Hi. Mr Corbyn, you've said that you'll try and do anything to block No Deal, but does that include working with the Conservatives? So if Conservative rebels this week put down a motion to try and block No Deal, would Labour fall behind it? Or is it only the case that you would go for it if it was a Labour, if Labour put the motion forwards?
Thanks. If I can deal with your question first. I have met the leaders of all of the other opposition parties with the exception of the DUP last week in my office. I provided them with coffee and good quality biscuits, and they drank the coffee and enjoyed the biscuits and then thanked me for having the meeting. And we had a good discussion about actions that will be taken this week. And that includes, obviously, working all across the House to try to prevent no deal exit. Remember, Parliament has twice voted down a no deal exit from the European Union, once by a small majority and secondly by a very large majority. And after that, I wrote to all of the 116 MPs of other parties that voted against no deal, asking them to work with us, and that's exactly what we're doing. And if you can contain your excitement for another 28 hours or so, you'll get a fair idea of exactly what is going to be proposed in Parliament tomorrow. On the issues of people and how they voted in the referendum, I was in George Square in Glasgow on Saturday, and MPs were at demonstrations all over the country, and lots of other demonstrations also took place. People were at those demonstrations who both voted Leave and Remain for 2 reasons. One, they were very angry about the way the Prime Minister is behaving and his attempt to shut down Parliament to prevent debate and prevent a decision taking place. And also because they are alarmed at the prospects of a no-deal exit. Our manifesto in 2017 said that we would not countenance a no-deal exit from the European Union. There had to be future arrangements put in place. And so to people that voted Leave, they may have had many, many reasons and motivations for voting Leave, but nobody voted to lose their rights, lose their job, or see a sweetheart trade deal set up with the United States. And so we would fight the campaign on our transformative agenda for this country, to bring about social justice, equality, to invest in areas that have had no investment, and to bring about a national education service to give real hope to young people that they will get the education they need and deserve. And we'll take that message, which actually unites people, and we will give people the final say on the relationship with Europe. Either no deal or Remain, or whatever other thing may come out of Parliament over the next few weeks. But let's be very clear. If the Prime Minister continues on this course of action, this dictatorial approach of closing down Parliament to prevent a decision being made by an elected Parliament, we'll obviously oppose them all the way. And I think a Prime Minister that's lost the support of Parliament, as he clearly and patently has, then I think it's time for that government to go and the choice to be there for the British people, who can then decide in a new Parliament what their direction is. We are determined to defend jobs and living standards all across the UK, and that is my fundamental message today.
I think we've got Jen Williams from the Manchester Evening News.
Hi, yeah, I just wondered whether you thought that maybe Labour had left it a little bit late to be doing the cross-party working that you're doing now, drawing up legislation and so on. And do you think that the party's lack of clarity on its Brexit position has partly contributed to where we are now?
And Liz Piper from Reuters.
Hiya. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I might well be wrong, but the assumption seems to be that we're going to see some kind of legislative move tomorrow in Parliament. Does this mean that this is basically an admission by Labour that there's really no chance of getting a no-confidence motion through this week?
First of all, it's not an admission of that at all. We are supporting moves across the House tomorrow which will, I hope, bring about a legislative position which would stop the government taking us out with no deal. I think that is a priority, and we have worked with the people all across the House ever since the referendum took place, and it was us who managed to get a vote through which found the government to be in contempt of Parliament. It was us that got through the principle of the meaningful vote in Parliament. Remember back, if you can, to the days when the then Brexit Secretary was given executive powers to do everything. That was challenged every step of the way in opposition in Parliament, led by Labour on this. And so to say we haven't reached out to others is simply really not very fair or correct. But we are where we are, and we will join with others tomorrow to try to prevent a no-deal exit from the European Union. And our position has been one all along of understanding the decision made in 2016, but also doing our very best as a party, as a movement, to protect jobs and give us the opportunity to invest in areas, many of whom voted Leave, who had seen no investment for 20 or 30 years and seen the loss of good quality, secure jobs in manufacturing replaced by fly-by-night economics, zero-hours contracts and insecurity at the same time as their local authority expenditure has been slashed and all the social infrastructure that makes up our communities destroyed in the process, leading to that sense of hopelessness. It is our mission to have serious trade relationships with Europe in the future, in or out. It's also our mission to invest in every community all across this country so we can bring the social justice that people crave. A child growing up in any town of this country deserves the same chance as every other child to get a good nursery, a good school, the possibility of training and a good job, not going into debt to get higher education, not going into debt just to survive. We need to address inequality in Britain as well as the lack of investment across this country. And that's exactly what the transformative Labour manifesto in 2017 was offering, and what, whenever the next election comes, we'll offer again. Only this time it will probably be an even bigger manifesto because more disasters have happened to people in this country over the past 2 years.
And on that note... And on that note, I can confirm it will be an even bigger manifesto. The bag's under, I think, a lot of the shadow cabinet's eyes, a testament to that, but it's going to be good. But on that note, I just want to draw... Sorry, I haven't got any time for any more questions, I'm afraid. I'm going to have to draw the event to a close now, but I want to thank everybody for making the time to come here to the greatest place on earth this morning. Please stay a while if you're not from Salford and enjoy what we've got to offer in Media City. And please tell your friends so that they want to come and visit as well. And if anybody wants to start a petition to move Parliament to Salford, I'll be right behind you.
Shadow Cabinet was here first.
So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Well done, Becky.